He was always very close with his brother, who taught him how to swim by throwing him into the deep end of the pool. He did save him though before he drowned, so that was the nice part. As he grew up, he eventually had to perform his mandatory military service, where he became a cook. And he always complained to me about the mountains of potatoes that he had to peel. And one day, I found out that actually that was a voluntary position. I asked him, why? With all these potatoes? And he said, because I got to sit in the truck and watch everybody else march when we had to go somewhere. He met my mom after his military service, both working at a vodka factory, which you do in Poland. And they married April 18th, 1976. I was born 10 months later, so it didn't take him long. At that time, he joined the Solidarity movement within Poland. And because he was such a social guy and knew everybody in the factory in which he worked, they nominated him as a leader and as a representative to Solidarity, something that he was not that keen to do, having a young wife and child. But he believed in the cause, and he didn't want to appear, he wanted to support that cause and not make other people fearful. And so he accepted that position. As you all know, the situation in Poland at that time, in the early 80s, deteriorated pretty quickly. It was actually his brother's idea, Jan, to move to Canada. Jan was very much the thinker. He did his research, of course there was no internet, he did his research, and he decided that Canada was a good place to go, and with a good large Polish community and the sort of supports that you would need for immigrants. And as it happened, it was me and my family, and not Jan, who moved to Canada. My dad was very much a doer, and I didn't appreciate it at the time. Of course, I was only 4 or 5 years old, but it was a very courageous thing to do. I marvel at it now, and I know many of you did the same. To go from your family and everything you knew to a place you knew nothing about. As in my dad's and my mom's case, didn't even know the language or anyone here. And you all found a community with each other, and I was always so amazed at how you socialized together and worked together all the time. Like another family to us. I mean, we saw you guys all the time. It was amazing to me how social and intricate and together you were. Something I took for granted, and it was only later in life I realized how special and precious that was. It's not something, I think, within our culture here that is as prevalent as it was for my dad and his. Anyway, it wasn't long after we left that martial law was declared in Poland, and it turned out to be a good idea that we left because the police did show up to my grandmother's door when my father had been ready, presumably to arrest him. So it was a good thing we left. We essentially escaped to Austria, first as refugees, then moved to Canada in 1982, as per my uncle's good research. And the family lore is that my dad closed his eyes and pointed to a spot on the map, and the closest place was Edmonton, for which I'm grateful, because it could have been Winnipeg. So. Anyway, it wasn't long before we settled in the woods. It really was. We lived in a few different places, but we settled in the woods very shortly after that, and we still live in the woods, my mom and dad did. Interestingly, the Great Aunt's Hospital in the woods opened in 1988, which would figure quite prominently in our lives. We took a tour. We went on the first week. They had an open house and we could go and visit, and we took a tour there. And it was only a year later, in 1989, that my sister Jo was born at the very same Great Aunt's Hospital. As you all know, my dad worked his whole life in transportation. He was a truck driver, a taxi driver, both in Poland and in Canada. And he worked eventually the last sort of few decades for Co-op Taxi, where initially he was a driver, of course he continued as a driver, but he became a shareholder within that company and eventually joined the board of directors as well before he retired. As I say, loved visiting with family and friends, and was a very social individual. He loved to haggle. Boy, sometimes my mom and me had to leave the room once he started because it was hard to watch, but I'll tell you this. I don't think there was a single car I got in my life where I didn't invite my dad along to help me get a good price. So my firstborn, Zena, was born in 1996, also at the Greylands Hospital. And when we visited Poland, she was 18 at the time. When we visited Poland, I think the most shocking and surprising thing to her was the way my dad interacted with his brother and sister, who were also very loud and passionate. He actually stopped and listened and didn't interrupt at all. My dad retired in 2016, and he spent a lot of his time gardening, which might surprise some of you. We have a small rural property where he and my mom built a garden, quite a large task, raised beds and fences, a lot of animals and wildlife. And then together as a family, we gardened, and we built a garage and bought a little tractor. And it was a wonderful way to spend our time together. I will always remember it as the best time we had as a family. He loved to cook and to bake bread. He was always very passionate about having organic food that was free of any chemicals or fertilizers or contaminants. He wanted to keep his family safe. And for that, I think he really enjoyed the gardening. He also baked his own bread. He would grind his own flour and bake his own bread. He made this special bread with spelt flour and just water. He would say, all that's in this bread, eat it, it's good for you. All that's in this bread is flour and water. And while we loved the vegetables, I must say the bread wasn't very good. That's all I had. Water. It's spelt flour. I don't know if you've ever had it. It's not great. One day a few years ago, he sat me down and he said he felt he had one uncompleted task in his life. He had been talking to his brother, as he did basically daily on the phone with his brother and sister. He said he had one uncompleted task, and that was that they didn't have a grandson on either side of the ocean to carry on the Szkotak family name. Well, he didn't have to worry, because my uncle had a grandson born in Poland not long after, and then my son, Bowden, was born in 2019, also at the Greylands Hospital, where we spent actually quite a bit of time, because he was born premature, and we spent quite a bit of time in the intensive care unit with him, about a month. So of course my dad was there, and actually I had my uncle and his wife were visiting from Poland, so we all, spent quite a bit of time at the Greylands Hospital, which we figured later in his life as well. And then things started to take a turn. And we know the exact date, it was March 22nd, 2023, when my sister, Jo, had a bad dream. She was living in New Zealand at the time, and Zena was visiting her at the time. And she woke up in the middle of the night there, I think here, maybe it was the day, but she woke up there in the middle of the night and was really upset. I think what happened was you had dreamt that he had gone to hospital and died, or that you had been informed that he had gone to hospital and died. And she texted him right then and asked if he was okay. And he said, yeah, he was perfectly fine. And then the next day, Zena called me and asked me, how is he doing? How is he feeling? And I said, he seems to be doing great. Actually, if anything, he's lost a little bit of weight. He's looking better. He's looking really good. Well, it was a couple of weeks after that my dad asked me to feel something in his abdomen, which I did. And there was a large hard mass there. And of course, he needed to see the doctor and get an ultrasound, get some imaging done. And it was a few days later that he had the abdominal ultrasound, which was actually on April 12th. 2023. And so he got the results on April 13th, 2023, to the day, 1 year, that today. And that was pretty clearly a widespread and large cancer. Eventually, with biopsies and such, he was diagnosed with a cholangiocarcinoma, which is a cancer of the bile ducts. And it had progressed, as this type of cancer usually does, by the time it presents, to an inoperable and incurable stage. And his doctors told him that he would have about 6 to 12 months to fight, which is, it turned out they were right. They did offer him some palliative chemotherapy that might give him 3 to 4 months, but of course would be a chore and a challenge. As you might imagine, having a history that he did, he wasn't very keen on doing something that involved foreign chemicals, so he chose not to take it. He died as he lived on his own terms. But we were able to do some fishing trips. As many of you know, he was a big fisherman, he loved to fish. Hadn't been able to do so actually very much because of COVID and just family circumstances. But we took him to a charter fishing to Cold Lake. My brother-in-law lives in Cold Lake, so we kind of set us up there. We also took him to Shuswap Lake, where we rented a house for him to. He was able to do some fishing there too. But as you can imagine, he spent more and more time in bed. And as his illness progressed, he lost quite a lot of weight by the end. He had lost actually 100 pounds, so he was not quite looking as big and strong as I remember him. As his pain worsened and his medications increased, he became, as you can imagine, more and more tired and spent more time in bed. Eventually, a couple weeks ago, he was admitted to the palliative care unit at the Greylands Hospital, which I was really hesitant about. It felt very final, I think, but when we got there, it was like a sigh of relief. It felt like the right place. It felt that hospital felt like home, and the care we received was wonderful. And also they were able to really get his pain well under control there, and he was comfortable. I could see the comfort on his face. And he did have lucid moments where he woke up and he was able to speak to us clearly. As you can imagine, those decreased over time. But last Sunday, that would have been April 7th, he woke up for the last time. Woke up enough to speak, I should say. And spoke his last words on this earth. And my mom was there, she was every day, all day. And she held his hand. And his last words were, "Yagoda, hug me." He then again fell asleep and passed away on Monday morning, April 8th, this last Monday, after 48 years of marriage. My parents' anniversary, 48th marriage anniversary coming up, just a few days. He wasn't quite so big and strong, loud and passionate at the end, but already I've forgotten how he was at the end. I remember how he was throughout his whole life. Force of nature, who inspired me. A lot of love. Thank you all.